Welcome to Leadership Rewired with Allison Allen, the podcast where we cut through the noise and talk about what leading really takes. No sugarcoating, no jargon, just real conversations, hard earned insights, and practical wisdom to help you lead through change. Build the cultures that work and stay human while doing it. Let's get into it.
The team is split on the decision. Your directs are watching for cues. The rumor mill is running hot, and everyone is looking to you to make it stop. Most leaders think this moment requires confidence, certainty, a clear answer. It doesn't. What it requires is something we don't talk about enough in leadership. It requires containment. I'm Allison Allen, and this is Leadership Rewired, where we talk about what actually happens when you're leading through complexity and not what's supposed to happen. Today, we're unpacking one of the most misunderstood aspects of leadership presence, what it actually is, and why confidence isn't enough, and what happens when you can't control or hold tension. If you ask most people what leadership presence really looks like, they'll describe it as confidence, certainty, walking into a room and projecting that you have all of the answers. And look, I get it. When things are uncertain, people look to leaders for stability. The instinct to project confidence makes total sense. Studies on executive presence find that it's not confidence that predicts leadership effectiveness. It's actually composure under pressure and emotional self regulation. That's a different thing entirely. Confidence says, I know what to do. Composure says, I can stay steady while we figure this out. And that distinction, it's everything. I'm working with a VP who is leading a major organizational redesign. Brilliant strategy, clear vision, and in every town hall, he is projecting total confidence. But behind closed doors, his team is fracturing. Why? Because he cannot hold tension without knowing everything. Every time someone raises a concern, he rushes in to solve it. Give an answer that he didn't actually have all the detail behind. He's making promises he can't keep, and he's shutting down conversations to keep the team focused. His confidence is real, but his containment is not. And the organization can feel the difference. When leaders project certainty that they don't actually feel, it decreases psychological safety. People sense dissonance. They stop bringing up concerns. They start hedging. They get really careful. And that's when real problems go underground. So if confidence isn't enough, and sometimes it's actually counterproductive, what are we talking about? What is containment really, and why does it matter so much? Containment is the concept that comes from organizational psychology, originally from a theorist named Wilfred Bion. He described leaders and institutions as containers. Their job is to absorb and hold the anxiety, the tension, the uncertainty in a system so that people can actually think, collaborate, act on instead of just reacting. When anxiety floods a system, people can't think strategically. You know this. They blame, they avoid, they fragment into factions, they act out. But when a leader can hold that anxiety, contain it, metabolize it, keep it within workable bounds, the team stays intact. They can focus, they can do the work. Containment isn't about having all the answers. It's about holding the question without collapsing under it. That distinction matters. So what's the difference? Confidence says, I know what to do. Containment says, I can hold this long enough for us to figure it out. See the difference? Studies on paradox mindsets, that's the ability to hold both and tensions instead of collapsing them into either or, shows that a leader can sit with contradictions. They can hold competing priorities without rushing to resolve them. They can demonstrate better adaptability, more creativity, and stronger long-term performance. Modern organizations are full of paradoxes. We know this. Short-term versus long-term, control versus autonomy, stability versus change. These can't be solved. They can only be held and worked over time. That's containment. Okay, so what does this actually look like when you're in the room? Containment is naming reality clearly without catastrophizing it. This is hard. It's not the same as we're doomed. Separating emotion from action. You can acknowledge fear without letting it drive decisions. Refusing to let pressure force premature resolution. Sometimes the answer is, we don't know yet, and that's okay for now. Creating just enough structure so that you have decisions and timelines and ownership so that that intensity converts into coordinated progress instead of chaos. It's steadying the room so people on your teams can think. I watched a CEO lead her company through a failed product launch. The board was furious, the team was demoralized, and in the post-mortem meeting, she took a different approach. She didn't rush to fix it. She said very clearly, this failed, we're going to feel it for a while, and we're going to figure out what we can learn from it without pretending it doesn't hurt. She held the disappointment. She didn't try to resolve it. She didn't manufacture optimism. She just held it. The team stayed intact. They didn't fragment into blame or self-protection. They stayed in the work, and that's all we want. What she did aligns with tons of studies on emotional containment. Leaders who absorb and regulate team anxiety instead of exporting it, they create psychological safety. And psychological safety is what will allow teams to learn, to take risks, to stay engaged, even when things are hard. That's the power of containment. So what happens when leaders can't contain? When the pressure is too much, or they never learn how, or they're just running on empty? Your uncertainty becomes their crisis. Your frustration leaks into your tone. Your anxiety spreads through the team. This isn't metaphorical. There's actual research on something called emotional contagion and the ways emotions spread from person to person, especially from leaders to their team. When a leader is anxious, stressed, or frustrated, it doesn't stay contained. It spreads. And it shows up as increased conflict, lower trust, higher turnover, and teams that become cautious or self-protective instead of focused and collaborative. Here's what I see all the time with the clients that I work with. A leader is holding tension and they're doing it well. And then the pressure builds from the board, from the team, from their own exhaustion, and they crack. Not dramatically. They start exporting the tension instead of containing it. They get sharp in a meeting. They rush a decision to relieve the pressure. They project frustration without realizing it or realizing it. And suddenly, everyone is scrambling to manage their emotions instead of focusing on their work. When leaders fail to contain emotion, teams become careful. They stop bringing up problems. They fragment. They spend energy managing the leader and each other instead of managing the actual work. The organization doesn't break because the problem is hard. It breaks because the tension has nowhere to land. And here's the kicker. This doesn't just hurt the team, it burns out the leader. 56% of executives report burnout. 73% say they're overworked without sufficient rest. It's not the task volume that's draining them, it's the emotional labor, the invisible work of regulating your emotions, absorbing others' anxiety, and suppressing your own stress to keep the team stable. When you're doing that without an outlet, with no container of your own, you're not building resilience, you're running a clock. And when containment is absent, when anxiety has nowhere to go, it converts into blame, avoidance, factionalism. The system destabilizes not because the strategy was wrong, but because the leader couldn't hold the emotional reality long enough for the organization to adapt. Here's the good news. Containment is a skill. It's not something you either have or you don't. It's actually learnable. Research on emotional regulation shows that leaders who develop this capacity, who learn to manage their own emotional expression skillfully, are measurably more effective at resolving conflict, managing crises, and keeping teams cohesive under pressure. It requires three things: self-awareness, boundaries, and support. Number one, distinguish containment from absorption. Containment is strategic. You hold tension so the system can function. You metabolize uncertainty so your team can move forward. Absorption is leakage. You take on emotion that isn't yours. You hold doubt that someone should be managing. You carry weight that serves nothing except the habit of carrying. Most leaders don't distinguish between the two until they're already burnt out. So the first shift is asking, am I containing for the organization or am I just absorbing because no one else will? Number two, name what's yours to hold and what isn't. Not every emotion that lands near you is yours to metabolize. You can hand it back. You can redirect it. You can say, that's something you need to work through with your team, or I can't hold that for you. This isn't about caring less. It's about protecting your capacity like the infinite resource it is. When leaders absorb everything, when they're the only place uncertainty is allowed to land, they deplete faster, make worse decisions, and eventually disengage. You have to decide what you'll hold and what you won't. And number three, build your own container. You can't contain for others if you have nowhere for your own uncertainty to land. Studies show that leaders with access to trusted peers, advisors, or coaches, people who can hold their uncertainty, experience lower burnout, better decision quality, and more sustained performance. It's not self-care. It's operational necessity. Find peers who are carrying this similar weight, get a coach, create a space to process what you're holding. Because if you don't have the container, you're either going to export the tension or collapse under it. Leadership presence isn't about being the most confident person in the room. It's about being the person who can hold the tension. So everyone else can think. Leaders who contain create psychological safety, reduce conflict, stabilize teams during crisis. When containment is absent, systems, people fragment. This isn't soft, it's structural. It's what keeps organizations intact under pressure. So here's the question I want to leave you with. In your leadership right now, are you containing or are you absorbing? Are you holding tension strategically so your team can function? Or are you taking on every emotion, every doubt, every uncertainty that lands near you and slowly depleting yourself in the process. Because if you don't hold attention, the organization will fragment, trying to resolve it for you. And if you're holding it without a container of your own, you're not building resilience. You're running a clock. Leadership presence isn't confidence, it's containment. And it's one of the most undervalued, undersupported capacities we ask of leaders. If this video resonated, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me on LinkedIn or leadershiprewired.com. And if you're a senior leader rethinking all the things you're carrying and how you're holding it, reach out. This is the work that I do. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you next week. And as always, lead with clarity and change with confidence.
Thanks for listening to Leadership Rewired with Allison Allen. If today's episode hit home, share it with a leader who needs it. And if you want more truth talk leadership insights, subscribe wherever you listen, follow me on LinkedIn, and keep leading with clarity even when it's hard. See you next time.